Jobless Recoveries, the new normal? The recession that began in December 2007 could have ended, some say, but all signs point to a prolonged recovery in the labor market. Comparing this recession to those of the past reveals that it is more like the previous two and less like earlier ones, suggesting that the path of recovery will be similar to the previous two as well, the so-called jobless recoveries. And if recent patterns hold, the negative effects of this recession are likely to linger a while in the labor market. Yes, this time it's different. There's never been a time like this before, and there'll never be times like this again. In search of further insight that might help predict the pace of recovery, taking a closer look at the factors that contribute to the rise in the unemployment rate during recessions, finding that the past three recessions differed from earlier ones, and that workers stayed unemployed longer once they lost their job. This finding implies a troubling trend. Longer unemployment spells are a problem, not only because they mean newly unemployed workers have a harder time finding jobs, but also because workers who are unemployed for too long can lose industry and job-specific skills. Losing skills can reduce their odds of finding a job during the recovery, as well as lower their productivity when they finally do find one. Current measures of the demand for workers by firms also suggest new jobs may be slow in coming. The evidence there suggests that firms are more likely to begin rebuilding their workforces by increasing the hours of workers who are currently unemployed before they create many new jobs, reinforcing the likelihood of a prolonged jobless recovery. The recent downturn, which could have ended in the third quarter of 2009, will likely be the longest since 1945. It is also already associated with the largest drop in payroll employment of any U.S. recession and the biggest jump in the unemployment rate. From the beginning of the recession in December 2007 to the end of February 2010, total non-farm payroll employment has declined approximately 8.4 million, or 6.1%. In the same period, the unemployment rate jumped from 5% to 10.1% in October, before coming down to 9.7% today, which amounts to more than 7.1 million additional unemployed workers. By all these measures, the deterioration in labor market conditions has been particularly stark. In a typical post-war business cycle, the unemployment rate starts leveling off about 14 months after the start of recession. Recessions typically lasted around 10 months, but it usually takes more than 30 months to return to pre-recession levels. Of course, each recession follows its own course and might deviate some from this average, but the range of most likely paths also confirms this broader pattern. The current labor market downturn presents a drastically different picture. Yes, again, this time it's different. First of all, the unemployment rate did not stop rising until 23 months after the start of the recession. Moreover, the cumulative rise so far is well above the range we have seen before. Overall, it seems like the path of the unemployment rate in the present downturn will be a significant outlier, featuring a steep and prolonged rise from its pre-recession level. Similarly, in a typical recession, payroll employment starts to decline at the start of the official NBER recession and takes about 12 months to stabilize. Unlike the unemployment rate, however, payroll employment comes back to its pre-recession level relatively quickly once the recession ends. On average, 21 months after the start of the recession. The past two recessions, in 1990 to 91 and 2001, were exceptions. It took 31 and 47 months, respectively, for employment to recover. Consequently, these periods commonly came to be called jobless recoveries. The pattern of employment decline in the present downturn resembles that of the last jobless recovery in many ways, which suggests we are in for a very large decline over a prolonged period. In terms of the net job loss, this recession is already the worst recession. In the sample, around 6.1% of pre-recession employment, and it happened over the course of only 2 years. So in other words, each time there's a recession now, it seems to be getting worse and worse. The jobs just don't come back. So, no jobs, no real recovery is possible. One might argue that the unusual pattern of this downturn might be explained by the severity of the recession. It is true that in general, the magnitude of the decline in real GDP during a recession is strongly correlated with the decline in payroll employment and the rise in the unemployment rate. The correlation holds somewhat for the recent recession. Real GDP has fallen 3.7% overall from the fourth quarter of 2007, the cycle's peak, to the second quarter of 2009. Supposedly the bottom according to the most recent data. So even though the decline in employment and the jump in the unemployment rate in this recession are both large, they do not seem exceptionally high given the size of the aggregate shock to GDP. But the correlation with GDP doesn't tell us what it is about a recession that makes it likely to be followed by a jobless recovery. Nearly every recession since 1945 fits the pattern too. To find a difference that sheds some light on future labor market recovery, we must look into the different factors that contribute to the rise in the unemployment rate during recessions. The unemployment rate reports the number of workers who are unemployed as a fraction of the labor force. But it does not tell us whether the unemployment rate is high because people are staying unemployed longer or because more workers have lost their jobs. That information is given by job finding and separation rates. In any given month, some unemployed workers find jobs and some employed workers lose theirs, leading to a flow of workers out of and into the unemployment pool. Recessions can differ in how much either of these rates contribute to the overall increase in unemployment, and we can find that such differences affect the course of the recovery. In general, during recessions, separations start rising as the economy enters a downturn, and job finding rates start declining. After some initial rise in unemployment, mostly in the form of layoffs, separations usually start tapering off before the unemployment rate peaks. During the past 3 recessions, though, the decline in the job finding rate has been playing a bigger and bigger role in unemployment rate fluctuations. Relative to the change in separations, the job finding rate declined much more in the last 3 episodes. The pattern of these rates in the 2008 to 2009, or some would say continuing recession, seems like that of the previous 2. The decline in the job finding rate during the past several quarters is the largest in history and well above the respective rise in the separation rate. Those separations increased sharply early on in the recession. More than 95% of the change in the unemployment rate since the recession's onset can be explained by the decline in job-finding rates. In other words, the sharp rise in unemployment that we have seen is not due primarily to a wave of job losses, but rather to the fact that once unemployed, workers' chances of finding employment have fallen dramatically. So, we have recessions that have longer durations and slower recoveries. And again, this time is different. Luke chapter 21, verse 35, "For as a snare shall come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth." And yes, these are more signs of the end times, transition days, which is a continuing process.